Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, we were talking about the fourth chapter, and the fourth chapter is all about being able to step aside. Being able to step aside for us to be able to understand transcendental topics. And this was seen in the last few verses of the fourth chapter, where there's very active glorification of the Lord by Srila Sukadev Goswami. And because there was such active, such profound glorification, you also notice that he is offering prayers so that he could move away. He is offering prayers so that he could practically step aside and allow the Lord to use him as an instrument. So in that particular context, we were sharing the fact that we in this movement need to be able to step aside for us to be able to accomplish our goals of preaching. And stepping aside requires one quality which is extraordinarily important. Stepping aside requires the quality of being able to develop deep humility. If one is humble, then they have the ability to step aside. It's very easy for one to be humble, then they have the ability to step aside, because it's very easy. They just don't have a standing. So the point we're trying to make here is that humility is required. It is a prerequisite. The prerequisite for being able to step aside is humility. So there are two ingredients. One is compassion. Compassion allows you to see what is required. Without the eyes of compassion, one cannot see what is really required. It is not possible. It is not possible for us to empathize with the suffering of humanity. We can't empathize with what is missing unless we have the ability to develop deep compassion. And this compassion is not mundane compassion. This compassion is compassion that is clearly associated with the mood of Lord Nityananda Ram. What is the mood of Lord Nityananda? The mood of Lord Nityananda is the mood of Srimati Radharani. How is it so? It is because Srimati Radharani is the internal mood of Lord Chaitanya. And when Lord Chaitanya wanted to empower Lord Nityananda, he gave him the blessings of carrying his compassion upon his head. The compassion of Lord Chaitanya made Lord Nityananda a mad man. He became divinely mad. He became divinely mad and possessed by a certain kind of compassion and love for the whole world, that he went berserk wanting to complete the service of Lord Chaitanya. He used to go door to door in Navadvip, knock on the doors, beg people to chant, and if they did not accept his offer, he would just roll on the ground, crying. So this was the compassion which Mahaprabhu bestowed upon Lord Nityananda. And this compassion was extraordinary because it was the compassion of Srimati Radharani. And what is the nature of this compassion? The nature of this compassion is such that it is the compassion which Srimati Radharani feels in separation from Krishna. She can experience separation from Krishna with great intensity. So when she experiences separation from Krishna with such great intensity, she has the ability to see the suffering of others who are not in touch with Krishna. So when Mahaprabhu comes down, it is Krishna in the mood of Radharani. He is experiencing the separation of Srimati Radharani from Krishna. In that particular mood, he can understand the suffering of the jiva who is also in separation from Krishna. That particular compassion which sees the suffering of separation from Krishna is the compassion we are talking about. We are not talking about mundane compassion. We are not talking about mundane compassion, because mundane compassion, while it is to be encouraged because it can develop a soft heart, will not really suit the purpose of this movement, because that requires a much deeper understanding of the needs of the soul. Mundane compassion has more to do with the bodily needs, or what is missing from the bodily platform. But the needs of the soul, on the other hand, are extraordinarily complex, and as a consequence, it requires compassion which comes from Mahaprabhu's heart. The compassion of seeing separation of the jiva from Krishna, saying, if I can't stand separation for even a second, how is it that they spend millions of lifetimes engaging in activities which make no sense? You see, this compassion comes from the heart of Lord Chaitanya. This is the compassion of Mother Radharani. So this is being carried by Lord Nityananda. So that is the compassion we are talking about. We are literally talking about becoming instruments in the hands of Lord Nityananda. For us to be instruments in the hands of Lord Nityananda, we literally have to develop the compassion and the humility which Lord Nityananda displayed while he was on the planet. Yeah? So we would have to understand that his compassion and humility was extraordinary, and that comes from understanding his relationship with Lord Chaitanya. So is the case with us. So what is the ingredient which is going to, what is the activity which is going to produce compassion and humility? It is Nam. If we are sincere in chanting Harinam, then we have the ability to be able to develop very deep compassion and humility. Humility is a product of knowing us in relationship to Krishna. This might seem quite contradictory. If one recognizes their lofty position, normally it should produce a lot of false pride. But in reality, when one is advancing in spiritual life and they get closer and closer, and Krishna Sambandha increases, and every day they are feeling closer to Krishna because their Sambandha with Krishna, their relationship with Krishna is becoming more and more evident, the greater would be their humility. Why is this so? It's quite extraordinary. It is so because as one advances in Krishna consciousness, and their humility, basically their humility is a product of one identifying with matter. So there is very little identification with matter as one is advanced in Krishna consciousness. There's almost no perception of the material pull. So that's one reason why there's such high humility, which is they're not on the bodily platform, so they can be humble. The second is, as they grow and grow in Krishna consciousness and understand their relationship, then they understand that the process of Krishna consciousness which has been given to them is so profound that they are not qualified. They also become very fearful of losing the gift of Krishna consciousness. That is the reason why it is also being said that as one makes advancement, you don't offend. Why is it that advanced devotees don't offend others? They do not offend others. In fact, they look at everybody in relationship to Krishna. The Uttama Adhikari is able to see Krishna consciousness everywhere. Why is it so? It is because of the fact that they are basically also experiencing a certain sense of humility because they feel completely disqualified or unqualified to receive the gifts of Krishna consciousness. They are holding on to a gift, and they are holding on to a gift which is so profound that they don't want to lose it. So there's great fear in one sense of losing a gift because you've been given something so valuable. So it is not nervousness, it is more a fear of losing that particular gift. The second is, it is also a matter of understanding that they are not this body. So there's very little to do with the body, so humility comes in naturally when you're not on the bodily platform. You see, pride has everything to do with what people think of us. Humility comes naturally when the person has little connections with the world. There is no perception of connection, great humility. Then lastly, it is also a matter of understanding that the gift of Krishna consciousness that has been received is so profound that you are basically being given something which is so profound that you kind of feel quite humbled just by the fact that you could even be in receipt of something so wonderful. So as one makes advancement in Krishna consciousness, they develop natural humility and they develop natural compassion. They develop natural compassion because they become more and more sensitive to the mission of Lord Chaitanya. They carry the mood of Lord Nityananda in a far more profound sense than they ever did. As a consequence, it is very deep and it's very, very profound, and they are able to basically identify with the mood of Lord Nityananda, making themselves fully available, not caring so much about what they receive, but constantly wanting to provide for others. This is the mood of Lord Nityananda. So now what we notice here in the 4th chapter, that the same mood is being displayed by Srila Sukadeva Goswami. He is basically displaying a mood of being unqualified to speak. Even though he is the most qualified to speak, he is saying, I am unqualified to speak about this lofty matter. What does he do? He is offering prayers. As he offers prayers, and he is offering prayers in such a way that he can become an instrument. He can become an instrument in the hands of the Lord, and as a consequence he can speak about the Lord. And this is basically the whole objective of us being a part of this great movement. In reality, Our ability to serve is directly dependent on the extent of compassion and humility that we have developed. So that is our ability to serve. Because to that extent, Krishna will use us as an instrument. To that extent, he will use us as an instrument. Now, what is it which is required for us to develop such deep connections with Krishna? What is it which is required for us to develop deep humility? The deep connections with Krishna, deep humility and deep compassion comes naturally for sincere chanters of Harinam. So that is again something which is very much within our grasp. In other words, our quality of service is completely dependent on the quality of chanting. So if we focus on Harinam, everything else is just going to fall in place. We would become better servants quite naturally. Because as we chant nicely, then there would naturally be a need to give the gift of Krishna consciousness to the world. And as we try and give the gift of Krishna consciousness to the world, we would also develop deeper realizations. In other words, we would be living scripture. You see, it is one thing to read Srimad Bhagavatam, it is another to experience Srimad Bhagavatam whilst engaging in service. That requires service. So Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Chaitamrita, it is all about a matter of us being able to experience scripture. You see, if we serve and we read, we are able to say that we read in Srimad Bhagavatam and we walk the talk and this is what we experienced. So this is a wonderful combination where we chant, we are motivated to serve, we are motivated to read, and as we read, we become enthusiastic because we develop realizations that yes, I experienced this and I experienced that. So this wonderful combination requires very deep absorption in Harinam. It requires engagement in service, because without engagement in service, there wouldn't be any realizations. And it also requires us to be able to qualify such realizations very nicely with scripture. As a consequence, one reads Srimad Bhagavatam and comes in touch with Krishna through Bhagavatam, comes in touch with Krishna through Harinam, and then engage our limbs in the service of the Lord. By doing all of this, one basically is able to offer more and more. But in reality, if someone were to ask me the question saying, how can I serve better? I would say, work on Harinam. That's where we should begin. Because without Harinam, we would not receive the gift of compassion and humility. It's difficult. In reality, it is difficult. It is Harinam and coming in touch with Harinam that gives us the gifts of humility and compassion. Without the gifts of humility and compassion, there wouldn't be the necessary, I would say, empowerment for us to be able to assist in a massive way. Or even to do our little services for that matter. When we are trying to serve Krishna, so many things could go wrong if he doesn't cooperate. So as a consequence, what we are talking about here is that this chapter, the previous chapter, is all about stepping aside. Srila Sukadeva Goswami is now getting into Srimad Bhagavatam. He is getting into descriptions of the Lord's activities. How could he describe the Lord's activities without the cooperation, the blessing and the empowerment from Krishna himself? So that is a reason for him offering prayers. This is also the reason why we chant prayers before our classes. This is also the reason why one can say that the good dose of Harinam is required before one can hear Srimad Bhagavatam, because it allows us to connect deeper. It allows us to appreciate Srimad Bhagavatam, gives us the intelligence, because Krishna has already entered into our ears and entered into our hearts through Nama. Then it allows us to basically facilitate Srimad Bhagavatam into our hearts as well. Now let's go into the 5th chapter. The 5th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam is basically, I want to give you a gist before we read the verses. Every spiritual discipline has the objective of purification. And then one wonders, what is this purification all about? In our principle, in our discipline, in discipline of Krishna consciousness, our objective is not purification. I just want to be very clear. Our objective is not purification. Purification is a means to an end. Objective of Krishna consciousness is to serve Krishna with love. But to serve Krishna with love, one needs to recognize their relationship with Krishna. One needs to be able to purify the senses of the impulses to act in this world. One needs to purify the mind, most importantly. And when the mind stops interfering, everything else becomes easy. So, our idea of purification is a means to an end. Yeah? Our idea of purification is a means to an end. But every discipline has the objective of a certain kind of purificatory process. When I use the word discipline, even if you were to stick to, for example, the different aspects of Vedic life, say for example the yogi, we read about the yogi's meditation and the yogi's process of cleansing the lower psychic centers for his ability to concentrate in the second chapter of the second canto. The yogi recognizes the 6 chakras, starting with the lowest chakra to the highest chakra, 6 chakras. The lower chakras, from the navel right through the end of the spine, contain impulses and samskaras, impressions of previous activity that are distinctly selfish. These have to do with sense gratification of different kinds, obtaining pleasure through the opposite gender. It has to do with being able to arrange a certain structure for ourselves, in a certain way. So it has a lot of impressions. The lower chakras, they carry memories of activities in this life and from the past, which are considered to be less wonderful. So the yogi engages in a process, we notice that in the second chapter, of purification of the lower psychic centers by the process of meditation and by the process of yogic discipline, which is basically, the cleansing of the psychic centers. We noticed that in the second chapter. He is cleansing the material elements. The yogi recognizes that we are made of the 5 different material elements, and because we are made of the 5 different material elements, he is purifying each of these elements, and each of these elements are associated with one of the psychic centers in the body, in the lower level. So he is purifying that through the process of yoga. So that's where the whole Ashtanga Yoga process of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama and pratyahara comes in. Now this is the process for the yogis. Now you also find that the Advaitins, the Jnanis, those who don't even respect the deity of the Lord in the sense as being real, ultimately they say that the deity doesn't exist. Yeah, the deity basically is also false. But even they engage in deity worship. They engage in deity worship, and they engage in deity worship with specific mantras and specific, I would say, use of certain offerings to the Lord, with the purpose of purifying their senses. They recognize that the senses are made of the material elements, and by engaging the senses and also making certain offerings to the deities, then they have the ability to purify the senses and the material elements correspondingly. So in a couple of sessions or 3 sessions in the last few weeks, I was sharing those with the yoga group, and some of you would have attended that. Basically, the offering of a lamp to the deity would purify the fire element in the individual. Offering of incense would purify the air. Offering of sandalwood paste would purify the earth element within the individual. And then this being done consistently year after year with certain mantras, etc., would slowly purify the senses and would allow them eventually to leave the material world, because the senses then becoming purified wouldn't perceive attraction in the material world, and consequently they would leave the world. This is the plan of the Jnani. Yeah? In fact, you will be surprised. There are many worshippers of Sri Radha and Krishna, many worshippers of Sri Radha and Krishna who are also Mayavadis, and they worship them with the purpose of being able to purify their senses. They do not worship them for the purpose of developing a relationship. They worship them for the purpose of purifying their senses. They are attracted to the divine couple. They are sometimes found in the region of Braja. You can find them in the northern part of India. There are temples, there are certain groups and different mutts. They worship life-size deities of Radha and Krishna. It will be as if you are entering into one of our temples. But then the objective of the worshipper is very different. The objective of the worshipper is not so much to develop a relationship, develop sambandha, to develop the ability to love the Lord, to develop the ability to serve Him with love and surrender. That is not the objective. The objective is, let me worship the deity form so that I could be purified, and with purified senses, I would basically have the ability to leave this creation. The objective is moksha. The objective is basically leaving this world, which is Jnana Marga, but they do not think that the deities of Radha and Krishna exist beyond the material sky. They believe that even the murtis of Radha and Krishna have a certain form here, and then ultimately what is superior is formless. This is where the whole difference between Vaishnavism and personal worship versus impersonalism comes in. So one has to be very careful in distinguishing different worshippers, because one can worship, but the motivation could be very different. So as a consequence, externally it may appear as if they're doing what we are doing. In reality, it's very different. In our situation, we are completely clear that the deities of Radha and Krishna are Radha and Krishna. There's no difference. There really isn't any difference between the deities of Radha and Krishna and the eternal divine couple Radha and Krishna. This is the bona fide form. Krishna appears, Radharani is there, we engage in service, we engage our senses in the service. As a consequence, we are slowly, steadily developing a relationship with the divine couple. This is our objective. Our objective is falling in love. Our objective is not purification. But to fall in love, we need purification. So purification is a means to an end. So one has to understand clearly that purification is needed. But then we wonder, what is the need for purification? Why is it that we are even talking of purification? That is the subject matter of chapter 5 of 2nd Canto. Where is the need for purification? What happened to us? What happened to us? Okay, so it's interesting. It is interesting that the conversation of the fifth chapter starts with the conversation between Sri Narad Muni and Lord Brahma. Sri Narad Muni is inquiring from Lord Brahma. He is asking him saying, are you the original creator? In other words, Sri Narad Muni is asking Lord Brahma, do you have a boss? Do you have a boss? Because it appears that we can't see anybody other than you. You are the creator. You seem to be doing the creation. As a consequence, is it someone else who is up there above you? Do you have a boss? So this question is being asked of by Sri Narad Muni for our benefit, so that Lord Brahma could answer this question for our benefit as well. Now, what is important is for us to understand this. Please pay close attention to this. Lord Brahma is the creator. To create, one requires to engage with the mode of passion. Please understand that to create, one requires to engage with the mode of passion. But how do you engage with the mode of passion? Do you engage with the mode of passion in passion? Or do you engage with the mode of passion in goodness? Lord Brahma is situated in the highest point of the material universe in almost pure goodness. Almost pure goodness. Satya Loka, where Lord Brahma sits, is almost pure goodness. It is almost Shuddha Sattva. There is some influence of passion and ignorance. He is actually sitting in a very high, lofty position of consciousness. After sitting in a very high, lofty position of consciousness, that lofty position of consciousness allows him to receive input from the Supreme Lord. It allows him to understand and stay within the boundaries set by the Supreme Lord. It allows him to a large extent to be not so involved with what is being created below, to remain aloof, so that at the time of dissolution he could depart to the spiritual sky. So this is how Lord Brahma creates. Look at our situation. We create as well. When we create, in the sense when we go into a corporate organization, when we become a part of a corporation, when we give up or take in a certain role, we have a certain objective, we have been given a certain task to accomplish, and then we have been asked to create. When we create, we do not create sitting in the highest position in the universe. We do not create immersed in the highest levels of sattva. We create enmeshed in passion and ignorance. So most of the activities that we do outside of Krishna consciousness at the workplace, for most part, is simply passion and ignorance. How do you not get affected by that? It is impossible. It is impossible to come home from such activity without an influence. For most devotees who go to work, they go to work and it's almost a 180-degree turn. Before they go to work, they are chanting and they're completely immersed in Krishna consciousness. Once they go to work, they have to make a 180-degree turn because they have to fit themselves into the corporate mood, they have to fit themselves into the objectives of the boss, they have to fit themselves into the objectives of their peers and their batchmates and whoever else is working with them, their teams, because you can't do it on your own, you have to do it with others. But as you enmesh yourself more and more with the objectives set by those who are not Krishna conscious, then greater would be our coming in touch with passion and ignorance. When we come in touch greater and greater with passion and ignorance, we come back home completely covered with passion and ignorance. Then again the process of cleansing starts. We again chant, we again engage in worship, we again reinforce our identity as being a servant of the Lord. So this process goes on throughout our working life, and as a consequence, one can say for most part of our adult life, even as devotees, we are constantly conflicted on a day-to-day basis with why we do what we do. This is our situation. This contrasts with Lord Brahma. In Lord Brahma's case, the situation is very different. He is engaging in the process of creation. However, he is situated in the highest levels of consciousness. He is completely aware to a large extent of what is the objective of his creation. He is being directed by the Lord and he is trying to please his master, the Supreme Lord. That's the difference between working for Krishna versus working for the objective of the material world. Because the objectives of the material world are steeped with passion and ignorance. So there's a huge difference between the two. Yeah? So there's one where you go and you come back and you have to cleanse yourself and then you start all over again. The other is where there's a fair chance that you could make it back without actually taking a hit. There's a big difference between the two. So what is the message which is being given here? The message is very simple. If you want to create and you want to engage in the world, the fundamental basic requirement is to be situated in the highest modes of goodness. The devotee problem that we face in our institutions today, the problems with most devotees face today are issues with being in passion and ignorance. That is the issue they face. Because they are in passion and in ignorance, the moment one is in passion and ignorance, when you're in touch with passion and ignorance quite profoundly, we set objectives in passion and ignorance. Our boss sets objectives for us. Even if your boss doesn't set objective for us, we set objectives because we get we get some momentum, we get some motivation by looking at our benchmates, our people who work with us and people who are supporting us, etc., and we become motivated to set up objectives for us. So this is the problem with most of our devotees. Most of our devotees suffer in sadhana because in most cases they are in touch with passion and ignorance. They take that passion and ignorance and then they're trying to chant, and then they don't feel the effect of Harinam because they are in passion and ignorance. Harinam requires to be positioned in the mode of goodness. We have to be at least in the platform of goodness for us to be able to experience Harinam. Instead, we are constantly in touch with passion and ignorance. We come back home and we try to cleanse ourselves, and when we cleanse ourselves, we are practically expending the time when particularly cleansing ourselves. What do we call as Anartha Nivarti? Anartha is all about developing objectives outside of the relationship of Krishna. This is an Anartha. Just imagine the multitude of anarthas that are being imposed upon us when we are in touch with people who are not in touch with Krishna consciousness. They impose multitudes of anarthas upon us. They set objectives for us. So what is the solution? I'm not trying to create problems here because I know that most of you are working outside. I spent most of my adult life working for a corporation, so I empathize with you. I know your struggles. I have experienced it. So what is it which I'm trying to get at here? I'm trying to say that if you need to survive in Krishna consciousness whilst being a part of the corporate world, we need to ensure that we are working very hard in being in the mode of goodness. That is how Lord Brahma gets unaffected by his activity. Imagine 100 years, one day of Lord Brahma, one day, and I'm not talking about the night, just one day is 8 billion plus years on earth. Imagine 100 years of such days engaging in the activity of creation, which is what Lord Brahma does. Not being affected by it is a big deal, because we get affected by what we do in the world. We all know it, we experience it all the time. So how is it that we can insulate ourselves, which is the whole topic? We need to copy and mimic Lord Brahma. We need to take lessons. How we do it is a different story. We're going to get to it. But we need to understand that there is a need. There is a very, very big need. Because if you are in Krishna consciousness, if you're chanting Harinam, if you're engaging in seva, if you're in touch with devotees, yet we come back and we are unhappy in this world, it means we are in passion and ignorance. Please understand, unhappy in this world equals passion and ignorance. Please don't underestimate this. Unhappy in this world means passion and ignorance. No one in the mode of goodness would complain of happiness issues. They would in fact not be able to perceive grief very easily. Higher the level of consciousness, less affected they would be by the destruction of what goes on around them. Greater the level of passion, greater would be attachment. Greater the attachment, greater would be suffering when that attachment is not being granted. So our issue in Krishna consciousness, especially if we are unhappy devotees, and there are so many of them, sad to say, there are so many of them, very sad to say, is because of the fact that they are basically in touch with passion and ignorance. That's the issue. The issue is being in touch with passion and ignorance. Why is being in touch with passion and ignorance trying to cleanse ourselves with the 2-hour, 1-hour sadhana that we do, which is highly inadequate to remove the dirt which has been accumulated the previous day? Be very careful with this. So what do? We need to have several approaches. The first approach, which we have to learn from Lord Brahma, is to have a certain principle. The certain principle is that we need to function for Krishna, which was the objective set in the 3rd and the 2nd chapter of this particular canto. We need to learn to function for Krishna. So what is the meaning of function for Krishna? This is the internal goal, this is the internal objective. Functioning for Krishna means being a moksha, being a akami, being an akami. There are 3 different varieties. We spoke about it in the 3rd and the 4th chapters. There is akama, there is moksha kama, then there is sarvakama. The reason why devotees are suffering is because we are either sarvakama, where we are desiring so many things and none of those things are being fulfilled properly, or we are moksha kama, where we have set an objective of wanting release from this world, but we are not doing enough for that either. So the first objective is to become akama. What is the meaning of akama? Akama essentially means we exist for the Lord. We exist for the Lord. We are trying to reinforce the identity of being a servant of the Lord constantly by engaging in seva, but we exist for Krishna's service. This is Trinadapi Sunichena. So the first principle of being akama is to wake up in the morning and understand that life as of today is basically what Krishna has given me. This is 9.22 of the Bhagavad Gita. I will preserve what you have, I will carry what you lack. You see, accept that first. Krishna is saying that in Bhagavad Gita, accept it. Krishna has preserved what I need and then he is carrying what I lack. Krishna has made this statement in 9.22 of the Bhagavad Gita, accept it. So today in the morning we wake up and say, what my life is as of today, with all the things that are missing, all the things that are half present or problematic, this is your arrangement, Krishna. Accept it. This is the first step. This is Trinadapi Sunichena. Then comes the Taroriva Sahishnuna, where we tolerate the circumstances of life. So this is the first principle. The moment we accept life, that it is Krishna's arrangement, Krishna will give us the intelligence to navigate our life out of a circumstance which doesn't work. Krishna will make the arrangement. The first thing that we need to do is to be able to accept that it is his arrangement first. So the first step in becoming akama is to accept that life is his arrangement. So this way we stop striving to make massive changes in life for our own sake. We become akama. We first accept whatever has been given, we accept it as his arrangement, and then we say it is your arrangement for your pleasure. That is our first step. Then we begin the process of devotional service. By beginning the process of devotional service, which is chanting of Harinam, Harinam has the ability to create a future for us. So this is the first step. Akama means we set an objective of chanting Harinam, accepting life as it is, and tolerating the circumstances. Circumstances in life sometimes are very, very good. Circumstances in life at times are extraordinarily problematic, as we see today. Today there's so much uncertainty. There are times which are very, very good, and there are times which are extraordinarily problematic. So we accept the day as being arranged by the Lord for our benefit. This is the first step in surrender. We accept it. And even if we don't feel sincerely of accepting it, accept it. Write down, yes, I'm not sincere, Krishna, but yet I accept it. Yeah? Because that's the process. So once we accept this, and once we accept the fact that today is the day where Krishna has made all the arrangements for me to come forward, because no time in our life would be disadvantaged in Krishna consciousness. Think about it. Will Krishna ever arrange things for us which would take us away from him? No. So the first thing to accept is he has already made arrangements which are wonderful, which are going to bring us closer to him. Accept life as you see it today, with all its challenges, that Krishna has arranged it. This is super important. This is the first step. The next is to look around and tolerate the circumstances. If the circumstances are good, tolerate it. Don't participate in it to the extent to which it can cloud our understanding. The second part to it is basically accepting it and then chanting Harinam. Basically, we are doing our very best. We are accepting the day, and then we are looking for how we could chant Harinam, how we could move forward. So that is what we need to do in terms of Akama. Yeah? Akama essentially means that we are going to exist for you. We are going to exist for the Lord. We are going to exist for you, Krishna. I am going to exist for you. Now, I am going to first accept that today is what you already arranged for me. I am not going to fight it. I am going to make improvements here and there, but I am going to make improvements keeping in mind as to what is going to allow me to chant better. So that is Akama. That is the first thing that we need to do, is set the internal clock a little differently. Start thinking from the perspective of sadhana. Start thinking from the perspective of Nam. That is where we begin. And then once we begin there, the next step is for us to see what is it which is going to facilitate our proper chanting. Then we start looking for different aspects and desiring certain aspects. So today, wherever we are, it could be very complicated. Why is today so complicated? Today is so complicated because 20 years back, we did not really think about Akama. We really did not think about Krishna. We didn't think about Nam properly 20 years back. And as a consequence, our desires of 20 years back have created the present. So if we want to get out of the present, we first accept the present as Krishna's arrangement. Then Krishna will give us the intelligence to operate within the present. We take up Harinam as the primary goal, and then we start looking to see how we could make small adjustments within our means to improve upon our ability to chant properly. So one of the first things one devotee has to do is we have to learn to strategize to be in goodness. Please strategize to be in goodness, because if you're not in goodness, we're going to get trapped in passion and ignorance. Nobody can get out of passion and ignorance. Nobody. That is why we suffer. Even though we have been given the highest philosophy, devotees struggle because they suffer and they struggle with their sadhana and they struggle with life. They even become disheartened. Even though they have been given the highest philosophy, they become disheartened because they haven't really figured out the fact as to how they could remain in the mode of goodness over a 40-year period of sadhana. Because devotee life is life itself. You see, devotee life is life itself. You spend an entire lifetime rearranging your life so that you could position yourself for better service, better chanting. So the first point which we need to do is start desiring that. To desire that, we need to accept the present as Krishna's arrangement. Wanting to change the present without first accepting it is wrong. Who is to say whether what is good for us and what is bad for us? Maybe Krishna arranged what is today for us to come closer to him. So accept it first. That is surrender. After accepting it, look for opportunities to make adjustments to chant nicely. The first adjustment a devotee needs to make is to position themselves in the mode of goodness. This is very important. Positioning in the mode of goodness could involve many things. First and foremost, the activity done in the morning. That's why there's such emphasis on the morning program. Because if you emphasize on the morning program, the consciousness that comes in the morning has the ability to influence the day. As a consciousness, is very, very important for us to focus on the morning program. When we start emphasizing on the morning program, we start worshipping Srila Prabhupada with Guru Puja, and then we are positioning ourselves to sleep and wake up and do everything for the purpose of waking up. We are almost there. You see, have you noticed those days and those years, even the good days and good years, even in the past 6 months, when we really functioned in the week wanting to wake up early and wanting to chant? We practically turned our life around to ensure that the morning program gets done. Then those are the days we have found are being extraordinarily effective, because we get insulated. A devotee needs to ensure that they are in the mode of goodness. Before you step out, insulate yourself, and insulate yourself internally. Internally accept the day. If you do not accept the day, and if you do not accept your circumstances, the moment you go out into your workplace, you're going to start desiring things. And the moment you start desiring things, you will never know if those desires are going to help you chant better or help you move away from Krishna. We will never know. We never know if things are going to help us chant better or they are going to help us take us away from Krishna in the outside world. It's very difficult to qualify. So it's always a matter of internally begging Krishna, saying, Krishna, I am accepting today as what you have granted me. Please, Krishna, protect me. I do not want to participate and gain anything if it is going to affect my ability to serve you. You see, this is the process of prayers. You can chant a very personal prayer. My Guru Maharaj chanted these prayers. He used to chant every day in the morning. He used to tell Krishna, Krishna, if there are even thoughts that are not in line with Srila Prabhupada's desire, sabotage those thoughts. Sabotage all the projects that I have which are not going to assist me in becoming a better servant. Sabotage my desires. Sabotage whatever I need to be sabotaged so that I could be a better servant. See, this is a very powerful way for us to ensure that Krishna intervenes and he takes charge, because we understand our disqualification. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this is that it is very complex out there. It's very complex. Our devotional service is a 40-year haul. You're doing it for 40 years, 30 years, in many cases for even more. So if you're going to be doing something for so many years, you need to get it right early on. If you don't get it right early on, if you don't understand what is going to work and what is not going to work, if we don't start setting an internal desire pattern which focuses on Krishna consciousness, you will find yourself in trouble 15 years hence. You will suddenly find that life has become so complicated that you can't even chant. You will suddenly find that life has become so complicated that we can't assist, we can't be with devotees, we can't do it. Because the desiring process has practically created a lifestyle which has taken us away from Krishna and practically taken us away from the process of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is work. It is a lot of hard work. Because the goal of Krishna consciousness and what is being given is very lofty. So if a lofty goal, if you want to leave not only the material world, but you want to play with the Lord, if you want to do what even Mother Devaki was not qualified to do, if you want to do what Sri Uddhava wasn't qualified to do, if you want to do what the Devas can't even think of, then as a human being, if you've been given that goal, it's a very lofty goal. And a lofty goal requires a tremendous amount of hard work. And the first principle of hard work is to have a plan. And the first principle of hard work is to understand your goal. So what we are seeing here in the 5th chapter is that if you don't plan, even for Lord Brahma, there's danger, because even in the highest planet in the material sky, there is some whiff of passion and ignorance. One can go wrong. In the next session, we're going to look at how this whole construction of the material sky is and how dangerous it can be. But in this particular session, I want to focus on the fact that Lord Brahma, even being in the highest planet in the material sky, is still in danger. He is in danger because there is a whiff of passion and ignorance associated with that planetary system as well. But he is in the highest mode of goodness. Because he is in the highest mode of goodness, he is extraordinarily well situated to be not bothered by the impulses and the goal setting that goes on in the lower spheres of the universe. Have you noticed that lower consciousness means lower planetary systems? Of the 14 different planetary systems, 7 are lower and 7 are upper. As the 7 upper, each level goes higher and higher in consciousness. The lower planetary system is lower and lower in consciousness. Lower and lower in consciousness means lower and lower goal setting. So if someone with very low consciousness is setting goals for us, and we kind of have to adopt to those goals, then we are also in a dangerous position, because we are also kind of heading towards a scenario which is highly destructive. So what we need to do in such circumstances is that when we go to the workplace, go insulated, be clear with your objectives, because Krishna looks for the objective, total objectives. He is not looking and picking your desires. He is not really looking into our heart and saying, oh, there he goes, he's thinking about this now. Oh, there he goes, he's thinking about that. He is not nitpicking. Krishna looks at the sum total. He's looking at a very holistic picture of our desires, and is saying, in a broad sense, this devotee wants to come to me. In a broad sense, he wants to serve, but he has some challenges. Let me try and assist him. What I'm trying to say is, if you have a broad plan, and you need to have a plan, and then you also are able to move forward and are able to basically offer your day to Krishna by first accepting it as his arrangement. It's a very simple thing. You go to the market and you bring in apples, and then apple is nothing but matter. You pay a few pounds, a few dollars, and you bring in apples. Then you offer it to Krishna, it becomes spirit. So the point is, matter gets transformed into spirit. Your day becomes transformed into spirit when you offer it to the Lord. Offer it, accept it, say that this is yours. Now then start saying, since the day is yours, the arrangement of life is yours, let me see what I can do with it. Then we start looking to see how you can position yourself. Because just as much as we look at ourselves and say, what is the best way to accomplish things in and ignorance. That is where devotees become unhappy, because there should be no such thing as an unhappy devotee. Unhappy devotees are those who are in touch with passion and ignorance quite profoundly. We have set goals in passion and ignorance. We have set goals outside of Krishna consciousness which we hope to achieve. And these are unhappy devotees, because the reason is that you have set goals which you can't control, which you can't manage. It's in passion and ignorance. And whenever there's something in passion and ignorance, it is also bound to be destroyed, it is bound to cause suffering. That is the nature of passion and ignorance. So the first thing that we want to do is examine our heart and see, where do we stand? Look at ourselves in the morning, look at the mirror when you brush your teeth, saying, am I really desiring to be a pure servant of the Lord? Am I wanting to chant Shuddhanam? Is that the only objective I have in my heart? Ask yourself this question when you look at the mirror. You'll be surprised if you're really sincere and honest. You will find that that's not the objective in your heart. If you're really sincere and honest, you will find, oh my goodness, this is not the objective. Yes, broadly I like to be in Krishna consciousness. I broadly like to be in Krishna consciousness, but then my heart is saying something else. I want 100 other things to happen before I can chant Shuddhanam. That is why Shuddhanam is so far away. That's why Krishna is holding back, because we are holding back. As a consequence, it is required that we become a karma. Look at your heart, push everything out, and understand that this particular day is yours. I'm your property. You have created the circumstances for me to come closer to you. Please give me intelligence for me to be able to come closer to you. If there are things in this day, in this existence of mine, which are not conducive for me, please remove them. Put me through whatever experiences you have to put me through so that I can serve you better. When we make prayers from our heart, then the process of anartha nivritti will take hold. Personal prayers, even said in English, will work. Krishna understands English. Yeah? Don't have any mistakes about it. Krishna understands English. He can understand English, he can understand any language you speak to him in. So he will respond and he will reciprocate. So what I'm trying to say is, it's important for us to recognize that A, we are not in goodness, and as a consequence we are in danger, because we are trying to engage in the process of creation. Yeah? Number B is, we need to be goal oriented in Krishna consciousness. Examine your goals. Be very clear, because we could be having multiple goals and they would all conflict because our identity is not in Krishna consciousness. They will all conflict. Then we will have to struggle with the identity of me, the professional, versus me, conflicts, would also be very conflicted at times with me, the devotee. That's the issue. So when we start with me, the devotee, and then start looking at others, then we would have much better clarity in being able to execute our life. So everything else would become clear when we become me, the devotee. So it's very important for us to kind of look at me, the devotee first, set goals, and then look at our day saying, Krishna, I'm not going to ask you to change anything if it is not going to help me in Krishna consciousness. This day is yours. So give him the day, saying, you have arranged it, you have made my life, I'm going to accept it. This is Trinada Pisunichena. But then we start looking at life and saying, what adjustments can we make to improve our chanting, to improve our seva, to improve our interaction with the devotees, to be able to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. 1 year of active planning, we start examining our present scenario again. How am I chanting? How am I hearing? How am I associating? If things are working well, then you have a fair chance that there has been progress and we have been basically being able to align ourselves. But this requires work. This is daily work. Yeah, this is daily work. Please don't underestimate daily introspection because it is required. Introspection, examination of what we do is required. Examination of the goals we are setting, the things that bother us, it's required. We need to see those more clearly as to whether there's a need for change, there's no need for change, what is conducive, what is not conducive. It doesn't mean you don't plan for life. It simply means that don't get into the idea of passion and ignorance being good for us, because it is never going to be good for us. Even the creator of the entire material universe sits in the mode of goodness. Imagine what could be accomplished even secularly if you are in the mode of goodness. Even if you're secular in your objective, how much could you accomplish in the mode of goodness? You could accomplish a lot more than if you were to be in the passion and ignorance mode which the world is in. This is a cycle that you see. Every 10 years, every 7 years, they consume a lot and then they get destroyed. They consume a lot and then they get destroyed. This is the pattern that we see in this world. Yeah, we have been watching this. Yeah, 2008 to 2015, 2010. Then from 2010 to 2019, then destruction begins. Whatever was created, everything gone. Yeah, and don't be surprised. Why shouldn't you be surprised? Because even Lord Brahma's work gets destroyed. 50% of his work gets destroyed at the end of his day. 50% of Lord Brahma's work gets destroyed. Imagine being completely in the mode of passion and ignorance, being completely not in touch with Krishna, and engaging in activity in this world that is just complete destruction. Lord Brahma, who is in touch with Krishna, who sits in the mode of goodness, and who is basically engaging in the process of Krishna consciousness, being able to engage in the process of creation under the direction of Krishna, he experiences destruction of 50% of his work. What to say of us? So this is a dangerous world if you don't know how to navigate the world. Time can go. As a consequence, it is required for us to take account of where we are, look at ourselves introspectively. These are not very complex steps where you need to analyze yourself like a psychiatrist. It requires some introspection, that is all. Look and see if the goal of Krishna consciousness is on the top of the list. Are you sincere about it? If you're sincere about it, you will find that the goal of Krishna consciousness, or being Shuddha Bhaktas, chanting Shuddha Nam, wanting to experience Prema, this is not on the top of the list for most of us. This is the truth. What is on top of the list has been created by passion and ignorance because we are exposed to it. That is the danger. And that is where we need to navigate ourselves out of so that we could be saved. So the first step is to strategize, put ourselves in goodness. Put yourself in goodness by looking to see how you could increase the mode of goodness. What is it which I can do? Number 2, follow scriptural injunction in desiring. Scriptural injunction in desiring requires that slowly, steadily we push our consciousness higher and higher. Lesser and lesser should we be thinking about our own needs. This is Krishna consciousness. We see it happen with devotee after devotee. So we set akama as a goal. We do not want to set akama as a goal which can be achieved the next day, but we set akama as a goal. How much can I accept what has already been given to me? How much can I accept the day as being arranged by the Lord? How much can I accept life as being arranged by the Lord? How much am I desiring change? What are the things that I'm constantly desiring Him to offer me just because I'm chanting His names? Question yourself all of these, because these are answers. This will tell you where we are in consciousness. If there are too many things that are involving things which are not related to Krishna consciousness, understand that our consciousness is in passion and ignorance. It requires work. So we start cranking up, we start putting a plan together, we start looking to see how we could put our hearts into working towards reaching the mode of goodness. Reaching the mode of goodness is a matter of arranging for a certain kind of diet, a certain objective, most importantly have a transcendental objective. Having a transcendental goal will allow you to plan and reach the goal. So set the objective of transcendental goal first. I want to serve. As a consequence, that becomes the goal. As a consequence, accepting the day and I want to chant becomes the goal. As a consequence, what happens is everything else that follows and every other power that you need to change your life would come from that. So once we do that, then the next step is for us to examine what we could do to manage our day. How could we position ourselves in goodness? And then once we do that, then we add ingredients of goodness right at the top of the day. The more you do at sunrise, greater would be the profound experience of goodness throughout the day. That is how nature is designed. So we should fit in and go with nature's plan. Yeah, the more you do at sunrise, greater would be its effect throughout the day. That is how it's arranged. So why don't we try and see if we can position ourselves for that? Once we do that, then we start looking at goals that are being set at the office. Can we ignore them? No, I'm not suggesting that you ignore your office work. Neither am I suggesting that you give up the objectives that have been set by your boss. No, I'm not suggesting any of that. All I'm trying to say is understand that that is not your life. Do it because you have to do it. That is where you are. That is where accepting life comes from. Accept that even your work at the office was arranged by Krishna. Accept it, but keep desiring that you somehow or the other should be able to serve Him fully, exclusively, without being distracted. But accept the day's work as being arranged by Krishna. Put your heart's worth into it. Yeah? So do what you're supposed to do at the workplace, where we examine our day and we start accounting for what the objectives of the day are. Put our heart into it there as well. I'm not saying we should be distracted there, but please understand that that's not what you are. And then don't plug in to the objectives they set there as being your life. Because for some people, jobs are their life. If the job goes, people jump out of the buildings. This happens all an end. We need a job because a job provides money. But Krishna is the one who is maintaining us. If Krishna has maintained us so far, He will maintain us from now on as well, regardless of the economic circumstances. So that is how our attitude should be as well. So I was just wanting to share that looking at Lord Brahma, please understand that most effective creation takes place when the consciousness is in the mode of goodness. We need to be able to mimic that, to say the very least. If you're engaging in activity outside in the world, mimic the Creator. Mimic the Creator. If you're not going to be in the higher modes of goodness, there's great risk. That is why Lord Brahma, the great creator, is positioned right at the top. Because in the mode of goodness, we have a fair chance of managing passion and ignorance. You need to be in the higher mode to manage the lower mode. That is why you find Lord Brahma right at the top. So this is just the initial part of this chapter. In the following week, we'll go through the different parts of the chapter where we will look and see where the dangers are. Okay, so I'll stop here and see if you have any questions. Okay, so there's a question here on chat. I want to know that purification is not our objective, yet in the case of Prahlad, he goes through austerities to see Krishna. How can we understand that? Okay, first and foremost, Prahlad Maharaj did not have the objective of purification. His objective was simply his faith. He had such deep faith that faith was so profoundly deep and it was so simple because he was a child that he was able to accept the tribulations and the austerities. He didn't feel the austerities. He had to go through it. He didn't feel it. But he could show very clearly, he could show very clearly that basically even a child of 5 years with very deep, very deep, I would say, faith in the names can overcome all challenges. That is what he was trying to show. Okay. Also, Krishna himself says it is not austerities by which one can reach him. So the next question is, why is it that there is deep desire to reach Krishna, yet there needs to be deep cleansing of consciousness to reach this goal? As in, desire is insufficient. Well, basically, desiring requires acting as well. Yeah? When there's deep desire to reach Krishna, then there's also a deep desire for cleansing of consciousness. So we can't really make a statement saying there's deep desire to reach Krishna. Yeah? We need to be able to go along with the milestones set by the acharyas to understand our consciousness. Are we in Anartha Nivritti? Are we in Nishta? Please read Madhurya Kadambini, or you can go to my website and you can listen to the Madhurya Kadambini classes and the Harinam Chintamani classes, and you will find that there are clear milestones. Then we can examine where we are in terms of our desiring. We can examine what we need to see in terms of different stages of evolution. That will help you. Yeah? Yeah, you can unmute and speak. Yes, please. You can unmute yourself and speak. That's perfectly fine. Hare Krishna. It's you're talking about setting a spiritual goal is evasive because it seems so far away. Is that what you're saying? Okay. See, it is actually a very good question, and I can completely understand the challenge because this is also a challenge. Because Krishna says, Manmana bhav madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. He says, always think of me. And then one wonders, how could I always think of him? Because I can't really always think of him. I have to think of my job. I have to think of catching, the bus or the cab or whatever it is that I have to catch to get to work. I have to think of my work. I can't really think of Krishna all the time. Manmana bhav madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru seems to be such a lofty goal. You see, Manmana bhav madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru means Krishna is saying, fall in love with me. Because when you are in love with someone, then regardless of where we are, that particular thought process of being in love with someone can overwhelm us to such a point where we basically can't forget them and cannot remove them from our thoughts. And this is an experience which basically is true even if someone has experienced it in a mundane sense, where their senses have been overwhelmed by the opposite gender. They have had this wrong notion of being in love, etc. And they can't think of anything, they can't function, they can't eat, sleep, nothing. Everything stops. So one can understand that it is possible. Just by looking at the mundane aspect, one can understand that single-sided, extremely focused, extremely dedicated notion of constantly being able to think of the object of your love is possible. Okay, let's keep it there. Now the question is, how do you get there through the process of sadhana? Getting there through the process of sadhana requires that you break down that goal into activities. The activity breakdown is being given in Chaitanya Charitamrita by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where he talks about the Panchanga Bhakti, the 5 aspects of Bhakti. He talks about the fact that you have to have sadhu sangha. Sadhu sangha is important because you receive faith by being amongst those who are faithful. They have the ability to take their faith and keep it into our heart. Then the second part is, once that faith is there, you engage in Nama Smaran and Nama Kirtan. And then once Nama Kirtan and Nama Smaran is going on nicely, where you remember the holy name and you're also chanting the holy name, the next objective is to read Srimad Bhagavatam. So we talk about Bhagavat's Shravanam, to hear the chanting of Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavat Shravanam becomes the third objective. Once the 3 objectives are maintained, then the 4th objective, which is being there, is to basically talk about Sri Murti Seva. Sri Murti Seva is to worship the Murti of the Lord, basically worship the deity of Krishna and Radharani. The last is to develop aspirations to stay in the Dham, Dham Seva. So these are 5 objectives. So if you really want to break down the lofty goal into 5 objectives that are measurable, then you can measure it as being able to have quality Sangha that inspires us to chant, quality Sangha that inspires us to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, quality Sangha that inspires us to worship the deities, and quality Sangha that inspires us to want to be a part of Krishna's Dham. These are 5 objectives. Now, if you want to take these objectives, you could look at it from the perspective of, how much have you done and has it qualitatively improved year after year? And it is somewhat easy and manageable to do if you start putting it down as goals. Say, for example, in terms of association with devotees could also mean hearing, Shravanam of classes. So you could basically even say that you would want to hear a certain set of classes, you would want to take notes, and you would want to speak about what you hear because that's how you're going to remember. So that can be done. So the more you do it, the more you're accomplishing that Anga of Bhakti. The next would be chanting. And needless to say, chanting, you can improve the number of rounds. You can also improve the quality of Nama and the chanting and the offering of Nama to Krishna. Similar is again Bhagavatam reading. Srimad Bhagavatam reading in a more focused, more serious way, in a very prayerful way, can take us to great heights. And then there is, the idea of worshipping the deity. You could do a lot with worshipping the deity if you so seek to do so, qualitatively. And then finally, we want to have a consciousness which would qualify us to be in Vrindavan, even if we are in London or in Birmingham or Coventry. We want to qualify ourselves to be in the Dham internally. It really doesn't mean that you have to be in the Dham. It has more to do with being able to qualify ourselves internally to be in the Dham. So when we are qualified internally to be in the Dham, it means that when we come to the Dham, we experience what the Acharyas experience in the Dham. We see things as the Acharyas see, so we are able to experience the Dham fully. So these are 5 objectives which can be measured, which can be put down. You can break it down, you can improve upon it, and then you can say that, okay, there are improvements, there are no improvements. This is the safest way to determine if you're making progress. And the reason is that even if you don't feel very good about Krishna consciousness, meaning even if you don't feel that you have accomplished a lot after 15 years, you still have accomplished a lot. You're still amongst the devotees. You're still interested in wanting to move forward. You can still appreciate ideas that are coming from Shastra. You can still appreciate Nam, which means that you have moved forward a lot. And you're also interested in moving forward a lot more. So please don't measure progress by how you feel, because that is something which can happen. That is something which can happen where in the long road in Krishna consciousness, there might be times when we may feel that we haven't really done what we're supposed to be doing. We don't feel good about it. And those are the times when we need to, kind of ask for mercy, beg for help, etc. from the Lord, and He would definitely answer and He would send help our way. So what I'm trying to say is there are ways to calibrate the big goal, and then there are ways to measure them, and then to be able to improve upon them. That is what each and every one of us is supposed to do. Break it down, because the evasive, abstract goal of falling in love with Krishna, even though it's very real, even though the goal of falling in love with Krishna is very real for those who experience it, That is quite abstract and quite far away for us, but you can break it down into activity and pillars that will help you reach there. I hope this makes sense. Yeah, yes, sure, please. Yeah. So your comment about not being able to appreciate Srimad Bhagavatam, or what? Yeah, see, sure, sure. No, no, no. I understand where you're coming from. Yeah, I understand that. See, the point is as follows: Srimad Bhagavatam or any scripture, Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna himself. Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna himself, and as a consequence, trying to understand him by our effort is not possible. It is just not possible at all, because by our own effort, it's almost impossible. However, what is expected is that we are in a parampara, and as a consequence, we have the ability to reach for help. So, my suggestion is that whenever we begin the reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, whenever we try to go deeper into Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a necessity for us to offer prayers to the parampara, requesting them, and then even submitting our helplessness. See, the idea is that ours and every other part of Krishna consciousness is very personal. Everybody is listening, everybody is available if you call out to them. So in your heart, you should be able to call out to Srila Prabhupada and to your Guru Maharaj saying, I'm unable to do this, so I need your help, I really need your help so that I can do better. So what I'm trying to say is becoming more prayerful can definitely assist. Everybody should try that. That is the first step. And so you are not alone when you say Srimad Bhagavatam, reading it, comprehending it, taking it in and being able to live it is difficult. You're not alone in that. A lot of people go through those difficulties, but what I'm saying is the way out is to receive Kripa. That's the only way we can do this. And I'm saying this because that's my experience as well. I used to have huge difficulties in reading scripture. And then I met my spiritual master one day, and this was 3 months before he left his body in 2005. And he told me, I asked him, what do you think I should do in terms of service, Guru Maharaj? And he told me, you should read Prabhupada's books and you should preach. And then suddenly, I found that from the subsequent week, I was able to read and I was able to speak. Then I realized that whatever I received was due to the fact that he somehow chose to bestow his mercy upon me so that I could understand Srila Prabhupada's books. So I was just wanting to share that it somehow worked for me, that I could supplicate myself to my Guru Maharaj and he could basically bless me and I could basically comprehend things, and I'm sure it would work for you as well. So you can offer prayers to your spiritual master and Srila Prabhupada and request them for help, because that's the only way for us to understand scripture. There's really no other way. Yeah, and that is the whole topic as well today, because even Sukadev Goswami found, he has to offer prayers before he can approach the topic of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah, sure. Hare Krishna, who is this? I'm sorry. Hare Krishna, yes. See, very practically speaking, it's as follows. Understanding Srimad Bhagavatam requires faith. And faith passes by sound. So as a consequence, even in Srimad Bhagavatam, they're not talking about reading, they're talking about hearing. They are talking about hearing from someone who has deep faith, because their faith has the ability to enter our ears and establish itself in our heart as our faith. So this is very important. It is very important for us to understand that hearing essentially means we are receiving faith and we are receiving sambandha from the person who speaks. So if someone has Krishna sambandha, their sound vibration will carry that Krishna sambandha into our ears. This is how Shraddha comes. When we say Adau Shraddha, faith is received through sound. The faith in the heart of Sriman Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, faith from the heart of Mahaprabhu was passed into the heart of Srila Rupa Goswami on the banks of the Prayag. Yeah, they had a conversation. Mahaprabhu was instructing Srila Rupa Goswami. Faith from the heart of Sriman Mahaprabhu left his heart and went into the heart of Srila Rupa Goswami. Srila Rupa Goswami's parampara is our parampara. We are Rupa Anugas. So faith from the heart of Srila Rupa Goswami went into the heart of his disciples. Faith from the heart of his disciples has come down step by step, and it has finally reached Prabhupada. Through Prabhupada, it is reaching us through his through his followers. So the point which we are talking about is that we are receiving faith from the heart of Mahaprabhu when we hear, because the sound potency carries faith. And that faith basically has the ability to enter into our hearts and destroy our nations. And that's why hearing becomes very important. So what we can do is that we can, and hearing also requires inspiration. It's a matter of being inspired by someone, because Krishna is attracting us through a devotee or devotees. You see, this is very important. Very important because we use the principle of Siksha Guru. When we use the principle of Siksha Guru, it essentially means hearing from someone who has the ability to transform our hearts. Because they carry faith, and their faith is being used by Krishna to attract us to him. So it is also important for us to find out who inspires us, because there could be hundreds of speakers of Bhagavatam, but it is a matter of being inspired by a speaker of Bhagavatam or multiple speakers of Bhagavatam. We could be inspired by more than one person, and when we hear from more than one person through whom we are inspired in our bhakti, then we have a greater chance of being able to transform our consciousness. So those are my recommendations. I am saying pay attention to hearing and then reading. That's my advice to you. Thank you. Hare Krishna. And then, now let's see, Ami had a question. I'm just reading from the chat here. You talked about compassion. How can we properly direct our compassion, as being soft-hearted also means you can feel sorry, bad for material problems such as poverty, hunger, homelessness, etc. Yes, in reality, we do not want to disregard human suffering as being third class. We do not want to do that. We don't want to get philosophical when we see someone very hungry in the road. We do not want to do that. That is actually not very human at all. Yeah, that is not to be encouraged, and that is not the Vaishnava way. If we read the Sat Goswami Ashtakam, you will notice that the Goswamis, even though they were completely renounced, they interacted with the villagers, they interacted with royalty, they interacted with everyone else, resolving their issues. This is very important. They were actually resolving mundane issues for people, even though they had very lofty consciousness. This was due to their compassion. So one needs to be very clear that this is basically a matter of us being able to understand that we shouldn't be shunning and ignoring, I would say, human suffering. But at the same time, we should also be fully aware of how much we can do. So for example, Srila Prabhupada used to cry when he used to see rich old men playing golf. Will you cry when you see rich old men playing golf? He was walking alongside a golf club in America. He saw these very rich old men playing golf, and he was crying. Srila Prabhupada, shed tears. He's saying these old men, they're basically going to die. It's just round the corner. They're quite old, and they're playing with a ball. Srila Prabhupada found it quite appalling the way they were spending their time, especially in their late years. This is real compassion. So compassion has to work there as well. That is the point I want to make. So we don't want to ignore real suffering, and I think we do make some arrangements for it. We can even contribute in certain ways, because I think Food for All and Food for Life, they all address the idea of hunger around our temples and hunger around where we operate in many ways. But we don't just limit ourselves to those who are hungry. We also give it to those who can afford to pay for it. We give them a plate so that we could bring them closer. So I guess it's a matter of understanding how we could go deeper and how we could use our day in a very effective way. Yeah, because resources are limited and so is our day. So we need to be able to narrow down and focus on what we could do best. We don't ignore, but we definitely need to plan and do it nicely. Okay, so there's another question here. I don't feel natural inclination for visiting temples, reading, hearing, or chanting. And when I do it, I'm not able to do it with the best of my capacity due to lack of interest. I feel visiting Dham is easier for me. I have a desire to do Rajmandal Parikrama at least once in my lifetime. Would that be beneficial in my purification, increase my love for Krishna? Of course, yes. Rajmandal Parikrama will always contribute and always enthuse us. And what we need to do is that even if we don't feel a natural inclination, we still do it as a matter of pleasing the Guru, and that in turn would also reward us wonderfully. Yeah, wonderfully. It will reward us wonderfully. It will reward us wonderfully. Any other question or comment? Yes. Yes. Yeah, see, yeah, good question. You see, here's the thing, and I want to answer this very straight. I appreciate your point, and I'm not saying that sometimes the words and the way things are expressed matter a lot, and people really can appreciate how it's being delivered. But what is important is that their faith and their distortion will pass on to our heart as well. So one needs to be very careful. Yeah, if the more subtle we are and the more, I would say, sensitive we are, we will have the ability to see this influence and this disturbance coming into our heart. If we are not sensitive and if we are not careful, then this disturbance that comes into our heart, we wouldn't even be able to catch it. It can actually be very, very detrimental to our future. So I just want to say that it is not a small thing. Yeah, it is best to avoid. It is best to avoid. That's my advice. I have seen it because when I hear, I pick up the consciousness very easily, and as a consequence, I sometimes am not even happy to come in touch with the sound vibration, simply because I pick up the consciousness and I know that consciousness is not going to help me. So, yeah, does it make sense? Sorry, you're saying basically that you're saying basically that you hear that and you're being encouraged in certain ways. Yeah, so it's a good point because I used to, in my very early days of Krishna consciousness, I used to hear a wonderful speaker because I wasn't very conversant with other languages, and as a consequence, I used to find finding English speakers of Srimad Bhagavatam quite rare. There was one such speaker, and I don't want to mention by name, and one such speaker, and she was very accomplished. And I used to hear her Srimad Bhagavatam, and I could just hear for hours and hours and hours because she had a very amazing, I would say, capacity to deliver and talk stories, etc. And then I found that I couldn't really be motivated to attend Mangalarti, to associate with devotees, and basically I couldn't basically associate with devotees. I didn't feel like I was able to do any service and go for Mangalarti after listening to. There was no motivation whatsoever. Then I understood that there was something wrong. So that's when I found that it was not encouraging. So that is what Sangha is. Sangha is all about being able to Sangha is all about being able to what do you call it? Be able to be encouraged by the Sangha to engage in aspects of devotional service. So it's very important. Yeah. Yeah, they're real experts. They're real experts. Basically, they're real experts. It, yeah. Then sometimes what happens? Yeah, it becomes an entertainment. So we should be very careful, and we should be very careful because this is all about consciousness, and as a consequence, we want to be very careful about how we are exposing ourselves. Well, basically, I think I need to understand the context fully because they are not wrong statements in certain ways. In other words, Krishna Paramatma is not a wrong statement, but it is not a statement that we use because we know that Paramatma is Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. He is Krishna is the origin of all the expansions. So it is not a completely wrong statement because Krishna is also Vishnu Tattva, Paramatma is also Vishnu Tattva. So what I'm trying to say is the context is very important. So what I'm trying to say is we don't want to dismiss it as being wrong, but at the same time we don't use it because we have more precise information in the Srimad Bhagavatam in terms of Krishna and his expansions. We use the word Paramatma. We use the word Krishna to distinguish Krishna from Paramatma, being personal. So the other part is about Naranarayana Rishi. Because of the fact that in Mayavada, ultimately even the speaker thinks he is Krishna, unfortunately. So for them, it becomes a big mess because ultimately they equate everybody as being everybody else because they think that it's philosophically absolutely fine, and these material distinctions are material distinctions, they're just distinctions in this world. So eternally there is no form. So there's no point in taking anything from them in that regard and even thinking or discussing it. It's not going to help us. Yeah? Because their whole philosophy, the foundation of the philosophy is confusing. Not at all. Yeah. Is there anything else I can help you with? Any other devotee with any other question? Dandavat. Dandavat August Prabhupada? Yes. Hmm. Yeah, Mahatattva is nothing but the material world. The Mahatattva is primordial matter. It is basically a combination of the elements and the working senses, the false ego, the mind, everything else. Basically, it talks about layers and layers and layers of material nature. So simply understand it as nature, material nature. That's what this is. Mahatattva is material nature. It is like the aspect of material nature. That's an expression used to denote material nature. Because the entire creation, 75% of the creation is spiritual, 25% is allocated to the material world. As a consequence, they're talking about this being a small portion of the entire whole, and it is called the material world. Does it make sense? It is like material nature. Exactly. You can use the word interchangeably. Yes, Mahatattva. In one sense, you can say it's primordial nature. It is, for example, it is primordial nature. It is the origin of what the material manifestation is even before it took place. So consider this as, for example, before your children start working something with Sculpey, they have a whole big mass of clay in their hands, which is misshapen. It has all the ingredients that are supposed to go into the different toys or shapes they have to make, but that is called the Mahatattva. It has all the material ingredients before it really takes shape. So okay, you can call it darkness. Why is it darkness? It is because there is the mode of ignorance. It envelops it. There are activities there which get destroyed. It is basically the material mode of nature. No problem. Yes, please, go ahead. Yeah. Hmm. Okay, so I think I can answer your question. What? Sorry, go ahead. Okay, so basically, I think what you're looking for is you're trying to go from New Jersey to California, and you're getting into a train, and you're wanting green lights in all the stations from New Jersey to California. Is that possible? Okay, so my thought to you is get into the train first. Don't worry about the red lights and the train stopping in on the way. If that happens, we'll talk about it then. Isn't that better? Good. True, true. But you see, the point is you need Sangha. The idea is to see the Dham through your ears. You cannot see the Dham through your eyes because the Dham is not visible. So you need to see the Dham through your ears, which means you need to hear the glories of the Dham from someone who can see. So being in Sangha with senior devotees who can speak about the glories of the Dham and the glories of the place is what you need to do. Yeah? That is what you need to do. You see, yeah, I think what I'm saying is you should think that you want to go and you should also accept it and say that, if I go, I would feel better. So you can accept it. You can examine that. what I'm trying to say is that it is not a matter of you becoming anxious even before you go. It's a matter of, first of all, desiring very deeply for you to go without worrying about challenges that can happen. If that desire is really overwhelming, you will find a way to be able to go through the parikrama without challenges. Yeah, so wait for the desire to become overwhelming. Yeah, the motivation. Yeah, motivation is through naam and seva, because you want to come to the spiritual sky, so you want to motivate yourself through naam and seva. But plus, there are also a lot of videos, I would presume, and katha about dham parikrama. You should hear those so that you can see the dham through those and motivate yourself more. Sure. Is there any other question? I can take one last question before we end. Hare Krishna. When you say something in your mind, what exactly are you referring to in terms of? Right. You mean taking a sankalp, you mean? Yep. Well, I think you should go along with the service like fasting, etc., with the objective of being able to serve better. That is a desire which you should always have. That in turn would ensure that you're doing it for the right purpose, and you will also be able to move forward and have that accomplishment, in tally in terms of being able to do more of it and less of it, etc., based on what you accomplish. So to be able to serve better. For example, with Ekadashi fasting, if you're very strict with Ekadashi fasting, you will find that after 1 year of Nirjal, if you do Nirjal Ekadashi every Ekadashi for one full year, it's a lofty target, it's a very big target. If you do that, after 1 year, you will suddenly find that you're able to wake up very easily, you're able to do your sadhana very easily, you're able to control your senses very easily. This is because it would automatically give you that facility of being able to control your mind and control your senses. So the point is, you should be able to have an objective which is distinctly associated with sadhana while you do your Ekadashi fasting. And once you accomplish it, you will find that things are changing in how you are executing your sadhana. It is actually a fact. You would be able to do a lot more if the Ekadashi fasting is strict. Does it make sense? You need to have objectives which are very clear so that you can look at it to see if that has been accomplished, so that you could do more of it. Okay, sure, thank you. All right, so yes, Hare Krishna. Yes, of course, yeah. Hmm. No, exactly. What I'm saying is yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. Hmm. Yes. Basically, we talked about akama. It's kama, akama, moksha kama, and sarva kama, sarva kama. Yeah, I will be uploading the classes of the previous sessions, 2 or 3 sessions, and you should listen to those sessions. And those sessions delve very deep into these three aspects, and it could give you a lot more. Yeah, uh, sure. One, sorry, pardon me. That will also come. That will also come. Yes. Did anybody else want to ask a question? There's someone, Ashwin. Are you raising your hand, or was it just an accident? I'm not sure if you want to ask a question. Okay, so I think it was an accident. All right. So I will end today's class, and I apologize. We had a lot of disruption in the beginning. It was quite unusual. So we then had a class anyways. So we'll again conclude, and we'll meet again the following week. Okay? Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining me.